Today we've got Dr. Jose Fierro with us today, and Dr. Fierro, a couple interesting things about him. He grew up in Colombia and got his his doctorate degree in veterinary science in Colombia. And I was telling him a minute ago that I have cows and I need a veterinarian, and not a good one around here. And so I'm excited about this opportunity. When we were interviewing Dr. Fierro, a couple things that really stood out about him, and I hope he's able to share that with you today, is that he's passionate about students, passionate about academics, and so I think that's the things that stood out for me. And so I'm going to let him share some of that with you. But do you want to say anything before we get started with questions? How would you?
Sure.
Okay. And then I'll just take the mic around and give it to people as you have questions in order that you ask them. If someone has asked a question already and you have someone else that hasn't, the preference will be given to the person that hasn't asked a question so that everybody gets an opportunity to ask. Okay? So I'm going to let him say a few things and then we'll get started.
Yep. Thank you very much, Chef. Can you guys hear me okay? Excellent. And you understand me okay? That'll be probably the most important question. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here today. I have enjoyed my visit, although rather fast. I have had a really good time the whole day. Forgive me if I look a little ragged by this point, but I made it to my hotel room about 10:30, 11 last night. Because of the time change, I got up about 5 this morning and I couldn't sleep any longer, which was basically 7 o'clock my time. So, I'm getting a little fatigued for the whole trip and the different events planned for me today. But I had a very good time. I'm very, very impressed with the level of participation and involvement of all the different groups that I have spoken with today. And again, thank you for the opportunity and having me here. And just a couple of things about me. Faculty member, actually. I was, before I became an administrator, I was a tenured faculty member. I was from the science department. I used to teach mostly anatomy and physiology and microbiology, but mostly microbiology in the last few years of my full-time teaching career. Then now, because of the time constraints, because of my day job, I don't get to teach microbiology very frequently because it takes a lot of prep time. So I'm doing anatomy and physiology now because it's less, but because it gives me, it takes less prep time. In fact, the microbiology and anatomy and physiology was the first subject that I taught. Very passionate about physiology. I continue to teach till this day. I teach, I've taught actually undergraduate, graduate courses at the master's level, PhD level, and I enjoy teaching very much. And I hope if I get this job, I still get the opportunity to teach here and there. I love the interaction with the students. I love the perspective that being in the classroom gives me for multiple reasons. The first one is because it allows me to understand the student's point of view better. When a student concern comes, I am able to see what is actually happening in the classroom, because it's very likely that I probably have seen that problem if I'm in the classroom versus if I'm not in the classroom. And also from the faculty perspective, sometimes it's easy to get removed from the classroom and see things differently when you have been out of the classroom for a while. So by staying in the classroom, at least a class here and there every term, allows me to see issues in different perspectives. So since my role is still an academic role, I feel that it's very important to be very familiar with what is happening inside of the classroom, what is happening in the real academic unit. So with that said, I'm here for you to ask me as many questions as possible. don't go easy on me. Ask whatever you want to hear, and I will give you my honest answer. You know, I'm not here to make a sale. I just want to make sure that you feel comfortable with my views, that you feel comfortable with my philosophies, and at the same time that I feel comfortable with your views and philosophies. So it's not my intent to tell you what you want to hear and later on do something different, because it really wouldn't be a productive working environment if I was to get the job that way. So anything you want to ask, feel free to shoot.
Hi, Dr. Fierro. Welcome to campus. My name is Trent Morrell, and I'm an instructor in geosciences and also work with the instructional design team here on campus. And obviously with your background with distance learning, director for e-learning and things like that, you have a passion and understanding for e-learning. And we offer a number of courses here online, and they're growing all the time. Online courses, hybrid courses, blended courses, high flex courses. How would you support those courses, the faculty with training, and also ensuring the quality of online courses, particularly in the sciences?
It's important to see online courses as a different method of delivery, because the heart of the course needs to be the same, whether it's offered online or face-to-face. So the curriculum that you cover in that course has to be the same. The rigor in the course has to be the same. The students' expectations and outcomes have to be the same. So my approach to online learning is simple. If cannot be done as well or better than is done in the classroom, we should not be doing it until we find a way to get it done the right way. If you cannot do that, no reason to provide a service that is subpar to the students. And obviously that will decrease the quality of the program. So that's basically my overall philosophy on online learning. Then we talk about the curriculum has to be the same, and the delivery is what it changes, and some of the tools that you use to deliver the content change. So once we identify those pieces, it's very, very important to provide faculty with the support needed to carry on that mission. Because it's very easy to say you have to make sure it's always at this level without giving someone the tools to make it happen. So it's very, very important to have professional development, not only on how to use the tools, but on how to become an effective online instructor. Professional development as to how to assess students online, because in many cases, the forms of assessment are not the same. You still have to assess the same outcomes, but you have to use different assessments because of the nature of the delivery. So then it's important to provide training to faculty and administrators as to how to gauge learning and student outcomes on those courses. Because yet again, you still have to assess the same learning outcomes, but you have to find a way to retrieve them from the courses and to make sure that you're actually assessing and what you teach in the course. So I think before you can actually tell someone you have to keep the standards this high, you have to provide them with the tools. So ongoing professional development to how to become an effective online instructor. Not everyone is going to be a great online instructor, just like not everyone is going to be a great lecturer. So it's also very important to remember sure, online is the next thing, and online provides access to the students, but is it for everyone? Is it for every student? No. Is it for every faculty member? No. So it's no reason to push people into an environment that they don't want to be, but it's important to support those that want to be in that environment. How do you ensure the integrity of the program? Well, it's important to look at online courses as standalone courses, no courses that were developed from a face-to-face course. One of the common mistakes when people develop online courses is that I get everything that I do in my traditional classroom get a camera like that one there. I have someone go into my classroom and record my same old boring lecture that is going to lose context once you put it online. In the classroom, you can gauge the audience and you can make them laugh or you can make them pay attention by using different techniques as an effective instructor. Once you get online, you can't do that. So you cannot just basically grab the course the way it is in the classroom and put it online, because that's basically a recipe for disaster. I see online courses, development of online courses as full development that will take place in a completely different way than the classroom. So let's say, actually I used the example, someone asked me if I had seen Wicked, the play today. And let's say if you've seen the play from Broadway, it's a very interesting, very fun play to watch, right? What will happen if I get the camera back there, I'll record it and I put it on TV and I give it to you? Would it be the same? You will lose a lot of that particular context. And obviously online courses have the same exact thing. You have to develop online courses on the basis that they are going to be developed online. So therefore, you develop effective assessments that are meant for online courses. In some cases, those effective assessments will still require regular exams, but you have to find a way to make sure that you assess the student and the integrity of the course is there. Could you put a final exam fully online? Yes. The problem is how you put it there. It could be proctored. There are systems that actually monitor the students when they take the exams online. For instance, ProctorU, right? Or you can make them come to campus and take the exam here. Or rather than have an exam, you can have a comprehensive capstone project at the end of your course. It will require the student to basically cover every single one of your major learning outcomes. It will be an ongoing project throughout the whole course that you will actually get to know your students and know if the student actually didn't do the job. I mean, you know as well as I do that once you get in the classroom after a few weeks of courses, you get to know the work of your students. And when the student changes his or her pattern, you know something is up. This is actually easier to do online because majority of things you see from your students are writing samples. So once you have read a few, you know the writing style. So it just depends of the type of program. Labs are particularly challenging online, but we have been able to find supply companies like Carolina and Words Biological that they will sell specific pieces and mail to the students. So the faculty member actually write the lab activities, put them in the course. The student purchase these specific items. They do the labs at home. And in order to make sure the pictures are the student, we ask the student to put their name, the date, and so on, and something that identifies them as a student of the institution. So we sort of overcome some of these challenges that way. It can be done. It just takes a lot of work, and it's probably the background work is a lot of support to faculty to be able to develop this type of courses. Thank you.
Welcome, Doctor.
Thank you.
My name is Kathy Snyder. I'm the Surgical Technology Program Director and Instructor. And to tag on to what Trent said on the topic of professional development, that's one of the challenges that we face here, not just helping people learn to teach online, but taking people who are content experts, say from various professional areas or fields, or just right out of a master's program, and helping them learn how to teach. So one of the visions that we have is this Center for Teaching Excellence. And that's something, a big project that in this position would probably begin to take that on. Could you describe for us your vision of what a Center for Teaching Excellence might look like, or philosophy of?
Yes. Thank you. I had a great conversation with Dr. Schaefer, and he actually mentioned the center as well. And it seems that in every forum that I have been, that has come up. So it seems like it's a very, very important part of the future of this institution. And I am actually glad of the question because I used to be the director of the Center for Teaching and Learning at my institution. So I have experience with the Center for Teaching and Learning. The Center for Teaching and Learning can be used in different ways, but the key of the Center for Teaching and Learning is to be actually a very fluid group that is faculty-driven. Usually, in my experience, the Center for Teaching and Learning will have a general oversight of the academic administration, whether the AVP of academics or a dean in the academic area will sit, will not have a strong voice, but it will be mostly to bridge the communication between faculty and administration. But for the most part, it's a driven, a group that is driven by faculty. I have done a few things with the Center for Teaching and Learning, and one of the things have been professional development. Professional development, I'm very in favor of faculty professional development because, as you mentioned, and I'm sure the majority of you can sympathize unless you come from the School of Education, we went through college. When you finished college, you were hired, and if your case was like mine, I was given the keys of my office, syllabus from the senior faculty member, a set of books, good luck, I hope I see you at the end of the term, and that was about it. So I really didn't have the background to teach. I mean, I could just stand there and recite all the content that I was able to memorize. That's relatively easy, but from that to learning is a huge gap. So I see the Center for Teaching and Learning as the unit that actually gauge the needs of the faculty, as a very actively involved unit that will have, I mean, it's made of faculty members, but it will have a very, very close relation with the faculty as a whole. What is needed in the classroom? What are the needs of the faculty in the development process? Differences of pedagogy and andragogy, assessment, metrics, and things like that that are useful for a faculty member to evaluate a student learning. A lot of times you can say, well, I have 70% success on my class, and you can have 75. But in reality, that doesn't translate into whether or not our students are learning 5% more or 10% less. It doesn't. And it's very difficult from the administrative side to actually gauge that. The best people to do that are actually faculty members. And the people with probably the biggest interest in finding out if they're being effective or not are faculty members. You go into your classroom, and it's very, very important to be able to assess whether or not what you're teaching actually is related to what you're assessing. And I said that as a typical example because I didn't learn this until a couple of years into my teaching career, that I thought actually I was a great teacher. And I came to find out I was assessing my students and stuff that I wasn't teaching them, that I thought I was, but apparently I wasn't. And that I also was teaching my students things that were not in the curriculum. And you don't see that from the driver's seat. You see that because someone else points it out to you. Problem is that when administration points it out to you, it doesn't come very nicely. It could be said in the best way or the most positive way, but as a faculty member, I don't like when someone tells me I'm not doing my job. But when another faculty member is starting to see the data, and faculty groups are starting to share the data and see that perhaps there are gaps in the curriculum, that is the role of the Center for Teaching and Learning. That is when peers actually help peers to make sure that the teaching is effective, to make sure our students are getting the best services as possible, and where you can actually see programs grow and get better. The other side that you can use the Center for Teaching and Learning is to drive college-wide initiatives. Besides the normal teaching, the grassroots movements for professional development. Actually, before I go to the other part, I will say that also the Center for Teaching and Learning could be a great opportunity to push for the formalization of professional development in the institution. as I said before, I was having a very good conversation about that with Dr. Schaefer, and there is not a formalized professional development unit at the institution. And I see the Center for Teaching and Learning could potentially push and drive that into a formalized unit that could potentially put ongoing professional development courses regularly scheduled, not only for faculty, but everyone at the college. That is hugely important for the well-being of an institution. And if the Center for Teaching and Learning is done properly, I think that center could drive the development of a unit like that. Now, in the non-teaching aspect, you can use the Center for Teaching and Learning to drive college-wide initiatives. They have to do with academics, but indirectly, like for instance, college-wide assessment. We have our process is called QEP, but yours is called EQUIP. But it's a similar process. Basically, it's basically an assessment process. They check the effectiveness of all units at the college, whether the units are academic or non-academic units. But the Center for Teaching and Learning, and the way I have done this in the past, basically focus on the assessment of the academic unit as a whole. It's not a unit that it helps point fingers to say you're not doing your job and you are. It's a unit to determine the overall health of the academic department without being punitive. And I see the Center for Teaching and Learning doing something like that. But in the long run, I think the best thing that could potentially happen out of the Center for Teaching and Learning is to drive the development of a formal professional development unit to help grow teaching methodologies and to help grow instruction in the classroom. And I think probably that's the direction of the president is thinking based on the conversation we just had. But it seems that it's very important to him as well. No problem.
Questions?
Rob Van Cleve, I teach computer science, and we have several campuses. We have online, face-to-face, and blended courses. Some of our sections are taught by multiple instructors on multiple campuses. How do you feel about how standardized courses should be when they're offered in multiple sections with multiple instructors on multiple campuses? And how much latitude should instructors have in how they teach that course?
Well, there are a couple of answers to that, and some good, some bad. But let's start with the hard one. If it is a professional program, it's very important that the course is standardized for accreditation purposes. And I mean, I think if you say computer sciences, you probably have certifications. They have to be taught in a specific way, and they have to cover specific pieces, and specific assessments need to be embedded within the curriculum. If it is that type of program, the level of latitude is very small. You still have to cover the content. You still have to basically assess the content in the same exact way. What it changes is how you spin the content, and I think that is where the faculty member comes to play. And even on standardized courses, I think faculty needs to be given the option of making the course their own. Just like I go to the classroom and we can teach the same subject, but chances are we teach it in a very different way. I think as long as we're covering the same outcomes, we should be able to personalize the courses. Obviously, with less latitude on professional programs that require specific certifications. Just to give you an example, I'm not really sure how it functions here, but in the state of Florida, the education programs, early childhood educations programs have I never seen so many standards in my life that you have to cover. And those standards have to be covered with the specific assignments. So I will say out of the whole program, there may be a 10 to 15% latitude for the faculty member to actually make changes or to put their own spin into the course. So when you get to that particular level, because of accreditation purposes, because of the type of licensing that the students need to have, is very restrictive. So you just have to develop the courses that way. When you go to the more traditional courses, I think you can go two different ways. One, in which you, as a faculty, agree on a particular curriculum that has to be taught. I'm not really sure if you have an active curriculum committee, but if you do, you probably already have a system in which you review the curriculum, and faculty as a whole determines what the students need to have based on the state standards. And once you get to that point, I think it's very, very important for the faculty. Obviously, administration has been doing this, but I think it should be actually more driven by faculty to determine how is it going to be monitored. Because you go through the whole process of saying, these are the standards that you will cover, these are the topics that you will cover. But once you give that to someone else, let's say an adjunct faculty member new, and we don't specify how it needs to be taught, you may not be covering the curriculum that you agreed to develop prior to that. Online courses will give you the flexibility, depending on how you develop them, to get a group of experts in different areas and develop a course that is not owned by me as an instructor, but us as a team. So let's say we're developing a course in computer science. That will be you and a couple of other of your peers if you would like to do that, or you and someone else. Then we get someone that is an instructional designer, perhaps out of the discipline, to have a different view. Then you get a multimedia person to make sure the tools that are being used are effective tools to cover that. Then you get involved, the dean of the discipline, to make sure that the student possible student concerns with the course are addressed, and you may want to invite also someone from the student services to make sure that what you put in the course is going to be useful from the student services end. Once you get a course developed that way, you can actually replicate that course for other people to use, but not before you have a committee of your peers review it. So once the course has been vetted by other faculty members that are going to be interested in teaching that course, only at that point you may want to make that course a master course, if you will. You can also have what the literature sometimes called the crafts method, in which you have a team of instructional designers and multimedia that are at the service of faculty, and they request consultations with them. And basically, as long as the course is meeting an agreed upon set of standards, you can sort of develop that course in the way you think it will be best to serve your students. But regardless of which way you go, I think the most important part there is the one, you provide all the services needed for the student, and two, that you are actually covering the curriculum the course supposed to be covering. And lastly, obviously, that your assessments actually are aligned with the curriculum that you are covering. That part, as I said earlier, I didn't find out until a few years I was teaching, that sometimes you start assessing things that are not in the curriculum, or because I like the topic, I cover more of it. And that is something that we tend to do naturally. And doing that sort of curriculum mapping and planning helps standardize student outcomes and learning outcomes. So it could go either way, basically.
You guys are making me get my exercise today.
Hello, Dr. Fierro. I'm Judy Dunn. I'm also computer science with Rob. And my question is about assessment. And I was not here when we started assessment at LCCC. Came in about probably 5 years later. And we initially started out assessing every course, every semester. full-time faculty anyway. Adjuncts, we've kind of never been consistent. Then we moved to assessing keystone, or I'm not capstone.
Capstone.
That could be keystone. Capstone courses for certain disciplines. Then on a cycle, based on one of our 4 outcomes, or general education outcomes. And then we moved to back to assessing every course every semester, and I'm not quite sure where we are now. Along the way, we kind of dropped program assessment, which we actually did for a while. And then there's also institutional assessment, which is the standardized testing, beginning and end, exit. And so I guess what I'm wondering is, do you have a model that you think works well for assessment? And if so, could you explain it?
Sure.
Thank you.
I am a big friend of statistics. So assessing all courses, obviously, statistically is probably the best way, but not the most practical way. You can have very representative samples just by, sampling, creating a statistic model, a statistical representation of the courses that you offer and what you're looking for. The problem with college-wide assessment is that if I get to assess my course every single semester, after a couple of semesters, I'm over, and I'm probably not going to help you as a faculty member, right? And trust me, obviously I still teach, and the last 3 years, one of my courses has always been picked. So I mean, it becomes complicated. So there are a couple of ways that you can do that, and the first one actually begins in the classroom, but it will require collaboration among faculty members, in which you will agree to a common assessment or to a common set of questions that you will include in your normal teaching. So even if I'm tagged for assessment, it's not that I have to do anything else, it's just something that I already do, that is perhaps already meeting some of the expectations of my course. So let's say if I'm teaching biology, so we agree in the science to say we're gonna all do a particular activity using the scientific method, and we all agree to do that every term, regardless of whether or not we're going to be assessed or not. And then the next step of that will make it less intrusive for faculty. The problem is to get to that particular common assessment. But once you get there, actually, you'll like it because it's less intrusive. You don't have to guess whether or not you're going to be assessed this year or the next one, or if I'm assessed and I forget, I have to, the last minute, give the students the assessment and so on. You just make it part of your normal teaching. Then you go to the next step, is to create the statistic sampling. So you look at how many sections of this course, and then you create a sample that is statistically representative of what you're trying to do. You select those courses randomly. You use whatever data collection system you have to select the courses here randomly. You get the call number, the CRN numbers of your sections, and if it's an online course, you find a way to pull the information from the system without even bothering the faculty member. Or if it is a face-to-face course, you let the faculty member know, and since the common assessment or the common question or the common activity has been already embedded within the course, that information is really easy to get out. That is the easy part. The hard part is to determine what are we doing with that data. Because getting data just for the sake of getting data, it doesn't make too much sense. And how you're going to evaluate that data after it has been collected. I think that's probably the difficult part. So establishing a system that is a little less intrusive for faculty and for the academic process, I don't think it is very difficult, but subtracting that data in a meaningful way and acting upon the data is probably the most cumbersome part. What is being done currently at Laramie County Community College to assess the data from college-wide assessment?
We started and stopped, started and stopped.
Mm. And who scores the common artifacts that are being assessed based on the general education requirements?
Essentially, we started off assessing a particular course. Then there was recollections that well, not everyone's courses met that criteria, so it extended to all courses. And we went with the idea that just to pick the outcome that most fit that particular course, but then we expanded it to all outcomes on the annual basis. And then we were in abeyance this semester pending a different approach, and I don't know.
I can give you some insight on what they're looking at now. Dr. Pant has implemented an assessment cycle. Every course will be assessed once every 4 years. Not only assessed, but also we'll go through a course review where you're going to look at the competencies and make sure they're the appropriate competencies and that they're accessible. And then every course will be assessed once every 4 years. Programs will be assessed once every 4 years. It's also going to be on a cycle and lead into the program review. And then we're currently looking at our institutional outcomes. We had these 4 institutional outcomes. A couple of them aren't accessible, and so that's kind of that we're working towards that. But he has started that process.
Do you, as a faculty group, get any, or do you have any involvement in the scoring of the artifacts, of the data? So did you get to do the data and the analysis, or is it done elsewhere? Or at least to do the first layer of data, if you will. Like, for instance, when I'm talking about common assessments, let's say we agree to do an exercise on the scientific method, and all the science courses, they cover that particular topic in the first chapter, do it. I may give it a grade for my class, but I also have a copy of that, the I don't grade, and that I submit for college assessment, and that someone else will grade using a common rubric that was developed by faculty. So when I grade my students, I could be missing things because, I see them all the time. So if they miss something, I could easily assume that they actually know because I have a little background and, oh, he or she knows because we have already covered this and we talked about it, so I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. When a third person is looking at the assignments, they will be able to see it from a completely different angle, which will give you, more real data of what you're looking for. And what I'm trying to get at with this is that process usually is done by faculty, in which you collect those artifacts, you agree to a common rubric of how those artifacts are going to be scored, and you blind score those artifacts. So basically you end up not scoring your own, you end up scoring whomever was given to you using that rubric. And then the data is given to, in our case, the Office of Institutional Research, and then we're able to sort of find out what is happening in the classrooms. But not to say it's happening in my classroom or in your classroom, it's happening as a discipline. Rather than being judgmental or punitive, we're just sort of evaluating the state of the students learning on particular outcomes. So my question was mostly of whether or not you get to score some of your peer assignments and what you do with that data. Because I will say that it's a very meaningful experience and very constructive as a professional development opportunity as well.
The answer is no.
No. You could have told me that before, and I'll save all the explanation.
Hi, I'm Meredith Rares. I teach anatomy and physiology. So, as you know, that class can have some just amazing retention rates. We keep 100% of our students 100% of the time.
Yes.
Right? Uh, what do you do to approach increasing retention rates or bettering them throughout time?
Well, there are different things, but traditionally, anatomy books, especially when we're talking about majors, those books are written in about 15 and a half, 16 reading level. A lot of the students that get into these courses, if we're lucky, they do about 8th grade level. The terminology and the concepts that are covered in anatomy are, as you know, quite difficult to understand even when you actually are able to read at the 16th grade level. It takes a little bit of time to really grasp the content. So if you combine a student that has a hard time reading anything, and you put them with a book that is well beyond their reading level, with concepts that are well beyond their understanding, you do know that that is a recipe for success. So some of the things that we have done is we do not allow the students to enroll in these type of courses unless they have complete the remedial reading courses. Unfortunately, and I'm not aware of what happens here, unfortunately, in many cases, the students test into remedial education, but they are still allowed to enroll in college credit courses without being able to have the tools needed to succeed. They know, we know, everyone else knows. I mean, if you look at the literature, you see that if you allow these students to enroll in the course, they have a greater chance of being successful in the course than being successful. There are obviously wonderful success stories everywhere, but the majority of them can't really do well if you don't give them the background. So we have made a commitment in which students have to complete their remedial reading prior to entering these courses, and they have to be able to complete that reading somewhere in the 8th grade level. So they have to test at least into 8th grade level. 8th grade seems to be very functional, not great when we're talking about our anatomy and physiology, but certainly functionally enough with the student population that we have. I'm not really sure what is the average here, but nationwide usually tends to be a little below that. So that's one of the things we do. The other thing we do is we're trying to find textbooks that still cover what we need to cover, but are extraordinarily rich in ancillary materials that explain the content in different ways. We have tried to use textbooks that are still classified as majors textbooks in a lower reading comprehension, but one, they have not been very popular among faculty, and two, in many cases, in order to reach that reading comprehension level, they, for lack of a better word, they dumb down the content, which is counterproductive for what we're trying to do. We want to provide the support, but we want to keep the academic integrity high. And the other part, we have utilized peer tutoring. So we have something that we call master students in different disciplines. So are those students that shine in the discipline, we turn around and hire them to work for tutors and teach their peers the little tricks for success to get to do well in some of these most difficult courses. Sometimes when I, as a faculty member, make the recommendation to say, this is the way you do well in this course, is not as well taken as when a peer said, this is how I got an A on this course. It could be the same recommendation, but it's better taken from the students. So there are different things that we do, as I mentioned, but yes, you are correct. Anatomy 1 has a pretty low retention rate. And Army 2, for some reason, is significantly better, but yeah. I know.
Questions? No questions? All right, I knew John would ask a question eventually.
I'm John Sanford, psychology instructor. Not familiar with the QEP process they have down in Southeast. As you mentioned, we are an AQUIP institution. What is your vision of or understanding of how accreditation should function in informing the operation of the institution?
Would you repeat the last part again?
How accreditation, the whole accreditation process should serve to inform the functioning of the institution. Help us figure out what the hell is we're going to do.
Accreditation bodies work very similar in different regions. Ours is SACs. SACs tend to be probably the most difficult of the accrediting bodies. They interpret the law to the extreme. North Central, I believe, we're North Central, right? North Central is very active, but a little more flexible on how you get to the point they want you to go. But overall, I think accreditation processes should not be done just to please the accrediting body. I think it's a waste of resources and a waste of time to develop an accreditation process only to please the accrediting body and to get their stamp for the next 10 years. I think accreditation processes need to be done in a meaningful way. They actually help the institution to move forward, because developing the whole program, the whole accreditation program, costs a significant amount of money to just, as soon as the accrediting body, the committee that is visiting the institution is gone, we put it in the drawer and we said, just go back and do whatever you were doing before. That really doesn't work. I think it's a way of wasting resources. So I think it's very important that everyone at the institution gets involved into what becomes the initiative for improvement at the institution, and to make sure that whatever topic is selected is done in a way that can be, or basically in a way that is sustainable. You don't want to do something that costs you a couple $1 million to please the accrediting body, and as soon as they're gone, you get accreditation, and you can no longer afford the couple $1 million to cost you to run one of those projects. So I think it needs to be sustainable. I think it needs to be meaningful to the institution, meaningful for the students and faculty. So basically, it has to stimulate somehow the student learning and instruction. So I don't believe on doing projects that once the accrediting body is gone, the project is over. I think it has to be a continuous improvement process. I think it has to be a project that is sustainable. And if you cannot say yes to those, probably the idea you have is not the right idea to carry on a project for accreditation.
So then as a follow-up, how do you do that? How do you get that level of buy-in across the institution?
I think it's not so much buy-in as a sale. I think it's more of a buy-in as here is where we are, and this is the data to back it up. So if we are able to collect effective institutional data and find out real problems, not something that I think is a problem or you think is a problem, that is an actual real problem, and that we have the data to back it up, that's where we need to look into. At that point, it's not the president or the vice president trying to make a hard sale to get everyone to help with the accreditation process. At that point, become a real process. Well, we're doing not so well here. We could use some improvement here, and here is the data to back it up. It's not something that I make it up. It's something that it is a problem. It is a real problem, and this is how we can improve. I think that is how you get the support. But I don't think it's about buy-in as a sale. I think it's about collaboration because we want to do better. I'm yet to meet faculty member or an administrator. Well, I guess I wouldn't do it that hard, but I'm yet to meet too many people that are not willing to do things for the improvement of the institution and for the improvement of teaching and learning. I mean, I'm sure you run into a few in any given group, but the large majority of people that work at an academic institution, they don't do it for fame and glory. They do it because they really want to do better and they want to help the system to improve. So if you show them real data with a real clear point of view and a way to solve the problem, to honestly solve the problem, I think you don't have to sell anything. You just will see that things turn around because people will want the change to happen, not because I said so. It would be nice if I said so.
I'll ask a second question here. The student services area has a responsibility in academic advising, and the academic end of the world here has a responsibility in advising students. Can you share with us maybe some ideas about how to facilitate that collaboration between the two arms of the college toward the same goal?
Yes. Traditionally, academics and student services have been two different entities, and they don't talk to each other. And us, academics, think that we know everything there is to know of how to teach a student, and student services think that by hugging everyone and giving them good advice, they will do great. The truth is somewhere in between. In the past, and I have to say that I was guilty of that too, when someone come into my office when I was full-time faculty member and they will say, well, advising told me to do this and that, I will say, why would they tell you that? They don't know anything about academics. What you should be doing is this, right? And they go and they're like, why are they giving you this guidance? You need to do that. And the truth, again, is somewhere in between. We do have the expertise in academics, that is for sure. You did go to school, and obviously you're a successful academic. So it's very important that you share that information with student services. Sure, academic advising needs to be somehow the oversight of academic advising has to be somehow done through faculty or through an academic unit, because that's what you know, that's what you do. But student support services have to be done through students' affairs. And it has to be cross-communication between the two. If I am complaining because an academic advisor is giving the wrong information to my students as to what courses to take if they are going to major, they're going to want to go to med school, rather than telling my student how bad academic advising at the institution is, I should go downstairs and tell them how bad, no. And tell them what needs to be done. Tell them, listen, I saw this student, this is the plan you have, but this is the newer plan. Some of the prerequisites have changed. Some of the requirements at different institutions have changed. This type of students, sure, you're giving them the right advice, but this type of a student may benefit if they do this and that prior to. It will help them to be more successful, right? Same thing if the academic, the student unit come to my classroom, rather than telling me why I'm not sending students to any type of student activities or why I'm not letting my students be part of anything, tell me how could I integrate my class into your services? How do like service learning, for instance, or community service through students affairs. So bring the faculty into the fold, and the faculty member will be more likely to let them get into their classrooms. So it will take some give and take, but it's important to share our expertise. I strongly believe that without a very good student services support, no matter what we do in the classroom, it will not be enough to make our students successful. And without effective classroom teaching, no matter what they do on the student services, your students will not be successful. So it has to be like a team. I used the analogy earlier today as a race car driver. You could be the best race car driver in the world, but if you don't have a pits, team in your pits that will make sure that your car is ready to go and tell you what's happening with the rest of your competition, chances are you're not going to win that race. So I see the academics and the student success as a team that will make sure that the academic and the soft skill portion and the support services go together. So, it's a matter of sort of bringing the wall down and allow some communication. And that communication, I believe, has to be modeled from the top. You may want to talk to the student success people, or the student success people may want to talk to you, but if you have a poor relation with the dean or the vice president of student success, chances are I'm not going to allow my team to work with them, and they're not going to allow their team to work with mine. So that has to be modeled from the top in order to make sure that that culture changes.
I'm going to double dip here again too, but just this kind of tails off of what John was saying, and you kind of alluded to this, but could you kind of expand a little bit more and briefly describe your management and decision-making process, style, and specifically how do you go about making decisions on issues that have been contentious in the past or contentious now, kind of like John was talking about, and how do you go about that and making those tough line decisions and knowing that not everybody's going to agree, you're not going to be making friends with everybody. How do you go about that?
When I make decisions, I use this lucky coin. I have my first cup of coffee in the morning, and I have a list of decisions to be made. And no, my management style is actually like what you see today is really what you get. I'm very easygoing, very flexible personality, but I like to listen to people. With that said, I'm not afraid of making decisions because I know ultimately if you hire me to do this job, you're hiring me because you're looking for someone to make that decision, and you're hiring because you're looking for someone who ultimately is responsible for that decision. Otherwise, you will be doing it. But I like to listen to people. I don't like to make decisions in isolation. Make decisions in isolation is really, really easy, but is also very counterproductive. Because what in my head could be seen as the best decision may not be the best decision for the situation. And those are two big different things. In my head, different models, when I'm trying to make a decision, pop up. And you can see the perfect model, but you also have to count that you're working with people, and people react differently. And if you're working with 100 people, you're going to get 100 different reactions. So that particular decision that I thought it was the best decision that could happen with the best possible outcome will really not work in that situation. So I really like to listen to people. I like to have conversations. I'm very open to conversation and to listen to the input. When you're making tough decisions, as you were saying, those decisions will, those decisions sometimes are going to make people upset. But something that is very important to keep in mind is that when those decisions are made, have to be made for the well-being of the organization, of the group as a whole, not to punish one or two individuals, or not to favor one or two individuals. So it's very important to explain to your team why the decision was made and being willing to deal with the hard times. So if a decision is made and 80% of you are happy with my decision and 20 are not, it's my responsibility to explain why the decision was made. I don't have to make you happy and agree with me, but it's my responsibility to be as transparent as possible and show you how that decision benefits the organization as a whole that may not be benefiting one or two of you. And it's important to have that tough conversation. I don't think it's healthy to make the decision and then hide and wait for the bad times to go away. I think it's very important to sort of clear the air, because it's not going to be once, it's not going to be twice, it's going to happen multiple times. The important part is that everyone needs to be informed and have an opinion. May not have a vote, because obviously that is why you're hiring a vice president of academic affairs, because ultimately that person is the one that is going to make the vote. But that doesn't mean that the vote comes from the vice president. You could have the best idea. Thank you. Let me make note of that. You can have the best idea. It was better than my idea or anyone else. So it's my responsibility to grab and use that as our voice. That does not, because I have the vote, means that my idea is the one that has to be moved forward. I consider myself situational leader. I don't believe that every situation has to be handled the same exact way. I believe that some situations will require specific approaches, and there are some situations that will require an extremely diplomatic approach that you will not reach a resolution until later on. So at that time, it's best not to do anything. It's just sort of deal with the situation until the best time to make a decision is there. However, a few weeks ago, I was speaking with a couple of my team members, and I don't know why we ended up talking about leadership styles for some reason. And I have always thought that I was a situational leader. And one of my assistants described me as transformational, and the other one as a servant leader. The transformational, I said, well, sure, but that is still somewhat situational, because sometimes the conditions are such that you can make things change, that you can make things happen, but sometimes the conditions are not there, or the timing simply isn't right, and you can do everything right and it still won't happen. But what it caught my attention was the servant part, and I said, how so? So she said, well, you seem to get out of your way to make sure that we get what we need to do the job. And I said, well, I am very aware that in order for me to be successful, in order for me to look good, I have to make sure you have everything you need to do your job. So she was correct. I got out of my way and within reason to do everything I can to get my team all they need to be successful. With that said, I also set the expectations really high. The more I give you, the more I expect. But I don't expect without giving. Because as a single individual, I am very, very much aware that I cannot do the job, that I cannot be successful. A lot of times people say, oh, you have done this and you have done that, and no, I have taken credit for this and I have taken credit for that. My team has achieved those results. I'm very well aware that I can't do it by myself. I'm very, very well aware that I don't have the expertise to do it by myself either. I mean, in an academic institution, the knowledge does not reside in one single individual. That's why you have multiple people working. That's why you have multiple departments. It's not my job to, come out with all the ideas and to type all the reports and to take credit for everything. It's my job to be there to serve and coach those that are actually doing the real work. So that's sort of my style. I like to provide a lot of support. I like to listen to my team, and I set very clear expectations of what I want. I'm not gonna ask you to do something that is crazy or that we don't have the resources to do. I may suggest it, And if you come out with it, that's great. But it's not an expectation. And if it's that important to me, I usually find a way to get it done and to get the resources to do it. But it's sort of clear approach to that.
Thank you. I think we're out of time, so let's make a decision to call it a night. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.